Hello, welcome to One More Thing Live. This is Kim and Kelly. Tonight we have decided to talk about death and how grief and death are not part of an active discussion in the community of supports for families and how perhaps it should be. So we're going to explore some of that in our conversation this evening. Some of this is a preferred topic for me, as I've just lost my son a few weeks ago, and have a little bit of breathing space to be able to even talk about how the systems that we went through don't actually have the conversation. So doctors have hardly ever had a conversation, despite the fact that there was a life-limiting illness. So, but you just kind of exist in this world of continued moving forward. And the conversation about palliative support or end of life never came until that resource was tapped into. And that had a great bearing on the quality of life for significant years. So that's part of what we're going to look at in a broader system.
Yep. And I think part of my interest and my dialogue around this stems a lot from, watching you and your journey and some of the other journeys of our parents in OMT. And it sparks an interest in an article that I read today about, having a conversation around quality of life, life-limiting illness, and death, potential death of, your loved one. Is often really not a comfortable conversation, and it's not something that is brought into the dialogue often until it's last minute and kind of no options but to think about it. And it's a surprise to people, even when you have a life-limiting illness. It's a surprise, and it shouldn't be. And my sense is that it should be a dialogue that we're having sooner rather than later.
I agree. I'm just going to reference the article. It's www.statnews.com, 2016-11-22, palliative care, rare disease, Norse. And the title is, "My son had a devastating, mysterious illness. The conversation about palliative care knocked me flat."
A very powerful article posted by one of our OMT parents today.
So that's a big read, and it brings up some of the issues of when do the doctors have the conversation as part of the treatment plan, right? And it's hard to think about that because we're everything is so geared at in the hospital. I guess in the community it's a little bit more flexible, but in the hospital it's like save the life at all costs. And then sometimes we miss talking about quality of life within that. Mm-hmm. Pain management can be a big part of that. We really miss the hit on pain management, and you can hear more about that through, Yummy Mummy Club and Dr. Christine have been doing a lot about pain in young babies. But there's a broader issue, again, about pain management and how quality of life is affected by that. But we don't really address that because we think, it's tied into end of life as well. It's, making somebody comfortable does create quality of life.
Absolutely. And I think, again, not having open and candid and honest dialogues around, death and what that means to you, to your family, to your community of supports, it makes it difficult then to also, a lot of people equate palliative care with death. Yes. And I think part of what we're trying to suggest is that palliative care isn't always about end of life. It's not always about that moment in time where you have to make a decision. Do we continue with this or not? And what's the implication of that in terms of life? It, like you said, it's part of a treatment plan. It's part of how do you want to live life while you are living? And it doesn't necessarily mean that the introduction of that means that we've stopped fighting or that we've given up or that there's no hope. Right. To me, what I read and what I've heard and what some have expressed to me is that, in fact, palliative care offers hope, hope for quality of life, hope for comfort, hope for a better, more prepared, and you're never prepared for the death of anybody that you love, but a more kind of, it's not going to be a surprise when somebody says we're almost there.
Yes.
Right? So I think the word palliative is not something that we talk about enough, or the notion of palliative care, and death is not something we talk about.
Well, one of the notes I have here is, when can palliative care be a partner in quality of living? And I think that partnership too, is to call out doctors and within the systems to look at partnerships with palliative, or to look at palliative as an equal system within the healthcare, as a partner to supporting clients. It seems to be one-off, or the team that you call at the end, or and I can't help but wonder too, if there's doctors out there, or maybe I'll ask Brian from White Coat Black Art this particular question: are doctors unwilling to fail?
Well, and is
that part of what drives our system, where you don't offer me the option of not doing anything?
Well, and why would palliative care, involvement of the palliative care team, I would ask the doctor, why involving a palliative care team equates to failure for you?
Right.
And how does not involving the palliative care team equate to failure for
right.
you? Because you've gone on and done the best that you can, and I'm still left here completely and totally and utterly lost
yes.
in this system, right? So often, with complex care and medically fragile family members, there's multiple teams, there's multiple doctors, there's multiple people chasing a path or chasing a plan. Hopefully there's some coordination, not always. But why would involving palliative care at any part of that be a problem? And unpack that a bit, please, medical system. And once you've figured out that this could be a really valued addition to the team, how does that happen in a system? Who checks that box? Who makes that call? It's certainly not the parents. It's certainly not you as a caregiver, or your child. Like, who's making that call?
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Yeah.
It doesn't happen consistently and appropriately, and
it just lends to the whole mystery of death or end of life, because it's not part of the conversation throughout your journey of healthcare. And of course, we're talking about families who are living through hospital systems for the entire life of their children, regardless of the age, from newborns, neonatal, to graduates going out at 18 into an adult care system. So that lifespan in palliative or pediatrics is huge. And why is that not part of the conversation? Why is it just not there?
Exactly.
And it just lends to the whole mystery, or the trauma, or the surprise, like the article talks about, oh my gosh, are we there? I mean, that conversation, that feeling happens over and over. Anytime your kid gets super sick, you're like, oh, is this it? Is this the time? Right? But and in little increments, if somebody's there, if you're lucky enough to be connected with families, Rogers House is a great system here, the palliative care support there, but just even connecting with other families who are part of that, who are sort of looking at the life-limiting illnesses of their children, then you're lucky to know that there's a little bit of information. But that's not coming from the doctors and the system that you're navigating 24/7 for all those years. And I think that really does need to step up, for sure.
And the thing that strikes me about what you were just saying there, Kim, is that when your child is really sick and you're at a bedside and there's medical personnel around and you're trying to make decisions about what treatments or whatever, that is not the time to introduce a new member of a team here. That is not the time to be introducing palliative care. That is not the moment at which you want to talk about quality of life decisions. That's not the moment. That moment should happen long before. And, I don't have a medically complex child. He does not have what I consider to be a life-limiting illness. He has a life-limiting disability, but he's not ill. But I feel, even having this conversation between you and I don't think about those things. I don't think about palliative care and end of life in my own context. But then I think to myself, but why wouldn't I? Because you never know when things could change, right? You don't know at what point somebody will become or can become ill. You don't know at which point an accident can happen or something can happen. And perhaps it is worthwhile, albeit extremely hard, thinking about it now and trying to think about, when would you want to have that conversation? It's certainly not at the bedside.
No. And why would it not be a checkbox, somewhere in your visit with your doctor? Do you smoke? Do you drink alcohol? Have you thought about, your pain management? Have you considered, how it is that you'd like to die?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not talking all the political stuff that Canada's going through right now, but just more about just touching on, death is part of the life cycle, like especially us in Canada, right? I mean, we're in the fall going into winter. That's kind of like a symbolic death cycle every year, and then we're going to come back to spring and there'll be a rebirth of something. Like, why are we not having the conversation? And why are the doctors not offering us the opportunity to have the conversation? You can always decline the conversation.
Exactly.
But the invitation is not there. And so I think going back to our base is that speaking about death, whether we call it palliative care team or other, but speaking about death is part of the whole picture of living and dying, the life cycle.
And the notion of talking about death or palliative care sparking some kind of grieving in a parent or in a loved one is, in my mind, not how it happens. We grieve all the time. We grieve as things are happening. We grieve when they're well. Like, there are lots of moments in the journey where grief is very prevalent. And I don't know that having that conversation necessarily institutes or initiates a grieving process. I think that's probably what's already been
it does not initiate a grieving process because from all the families who've had babies in NICU who have faced the information about their child's disability or disease or syndrome have all had to face grief, right? And as their child develops on different strands, they experience grief. As they look at their ability to work or have to stay home, they grieve. There is not a single moment in the entire life span of our children and ourselves that there isn't a grieving moment. And I think that, bringing up the discussion about death is not going to create grief for me. Grief already exists. It's my partner in parenting.
Exactly. I think you touched on something earlier that I think is worth exploring, is this notion of the medical system seeing death as failure, the medical system seeing palliative care involvement as a signal of inability to do something, right? Or as a sign of failure.
Right.
And again, a lot of us are grieving, and those emotions are very difficult for somebody to, quote, fix. And the medical profession is in and of itself intrinsically wanting to fix things. So I think this is an interesting conversation where kind of two worlds collide, the inability to fix and the need to fix, and how does that collision impact on those of you that are involved and in the middle of it and in the mix, and how could a conversation in the medical system about those things make a difference in the lives of parents who are facing terribly difficult situations that potentially could be made easier by a earlier conversation or an earlier involvement of the palliative care team in treatment.
Perfect. Well, we're going to wrap it up right there, Kelly, because that's the question. And that's what I hope you will all consider and comment on is your thoughts about this topic and how your teams can come together and support you better when it comes to speaking about death and being supported through the whole experience. Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, everybody. This has been One More Thing Live, our November edition, and we thank you for being here. Please like our page, One More Thing. If you're a parent of a special needs child, you're welcome to join our private group, One More Thing, number 1, MORETHING, but you must be a parent of a special needs child. Thank you all. Have a great evening, and we'll see you again for the next topic in the future. Bye-bye.
Bye.